Bonjour! Welcome to Rambo Loves History. I am your favorite French bulldog that takes you through mind-blowing history with style. Welcome back to Rambo Loves History. And what if I told you that the world's most infamous system of racial segregation arose in a land where humanity itself was born? That the country which gave us apartheid also gave us evidence of the oldest human art, dating back 100,000 years? As a French bulldog, I'm all about complex ancestry, and trust me, South Africa's bloodlines make mine look simple. Today we're diving into how the Rainbow Nation became both humanity's cradle and its testing ground for the darkest social engineering experiment of the 20th century. Our story begins not in 1948, not in 1652, but 100,000 years ago in the Blombos Cave along South Africa's southern coast. There, archaeologists discovered ochre engravings, geometric patterns representing humanity's earliest known art. These weren't made by primitive savages. They were created by the ancestors of the San people, whom scholars consider the world's oldest continuous culture. The San weren't just surviving. They were thriving with sophisticated knowledge that would shame most modern people. They could identify hundreds of plant species, track animals across vast distances, and create rock paintings of such spiritual depth that they still haunt modern viewers. For tens of thousands of years, they lived as humanity's ancestors had lived everywhere, in small bands, following game, leaving only their art upon cave walls. Around 2,000 years ago, change arrived from the north. The Khoikhoi, pastoralists driving cattle and fat-tailed sheep, entered the southern lands. Unlike the egalitarian San, the Khoikhoi organized themselves around livestock ownership, creating the region's first wealth hierarchies. But here's what most history books get wrong. This wasn't violent conquest. Archaeological evidence suggests centuries of trade, intermarriage, and cultural exchange. The San taught the Khoikhoi about local plants and water sources. The Khoikhoi introduced concepts of property and leadership. Now here's where it gets interesting. Around the 4th century, a migration began that would reshape the entire African continent. Bantu-speaking peoples, masters of ironworking and agriculture, began their 1,000-year journey from West Central Africa. This wasn't gradual infiltration. This was a demographic wave. The Bantu brought revolutionary technologies, iron tools that could clear forests, agricultural techniques that could support larger populations, and political structures that could unite disparate clans into kingdoms. By the 11th century, these migrants had crystallized into distinct peoples: the Xhosa in the south, the Zulu in the east, the Sotho-Tswana in the interior. They built stone cities like Mapungubwe, which controlled the gold trade with Swahili merchants. Great Zimbabwe, though in modern Zimbabwe, represented the apex of this civilization, a stone city housing 18,000 people, trading gold and ivory to China and Persia. Then in 1488, Portuguese navigator Bartolomeu Dias rounded the Cape of Good Hope, becoming the first European to enter the Indian Ocean from the Atlantic. He'd unknowingly discovered the pivot point that would transform southern Africa from isolated periphery to global crossroads. For over a century, Europeans saw the Cape merely as a landmark to navigate around. That changed in 1652 when Jan van Riebeeck, representing the Dutch East India Company, established a refreshment station for ships traveling to the Indies. The company wanted only vegetables and fresh meat for passing sailors. History had other plans. The Dutch settlement expanded inexorably. Khoikhoi pasture lands became Dutch farms. San hunting grounds became Dutch ranches. The colonists imported slaves from Madagascar, India, Malaysia, and Indonesia, creating a multiracial underclass that would evolve into the Cape-colored community. Dutch farmers, calling themselves Boers, pushed ever inland, developing their own dialect, Afrikaans, and seeing themselves not as Europeans in Africa but as white Africans. By the 1770s, these expanding Boers encountered a force that finally stopped them: the Xhosa kingdoms. For the first time, European colonists faced organized African states with iron weapons and military tactics. 9 frontier wars followed, each bloodier than the last, establishing a pattern of racial conflict that would poison South African society for centuries. But wait until you see what happens next. The British seized the Cape in 1795 during the Napoleonic Wars. If the Dutch had been profit-motivated colonizers, the British were imperial systematizers. They imposed English law, English language, and critically English liberal ideas about slavery. In 1834, Britain abolished slavery throughout its empire, outraging Boer farmers who depended on forced labor. This sparked the Great Trek. Between 1835 and 1840, 12,000 Boers loaded ox wagons and headed inland, seeking freedom from British rule. They were entering a land already in chaos. The Zulu kingdom under Shaka had revolutionized warfare, creating disciplined regiments that conquered vast territories. The Mafekane, the crushing, sent refugee peoples fleeing in all directions. The collision was inevitable and catastrophic. At Blood River in 1838, a Boer commando of 468 defeated a Zulu army of 10,000 using firearms against traditional spears. The Boers saw this as divine providence, proof of their destiny to rule the land. They established independent republics where they could maintain their traditional way of life. Then in 1866, a child playing along the Orange River picked up a pretty pebble. It was a 21-carat diamond. Within months, the greatest diamond rush in history transformed empty scrubland into Kimberley. When gold was discovered on the Witwatersrand in 1886, creating Johannesburg virtually overnight, South Africa's destiny as a mineral superpower was sealed. These discoveries brought industrial capitalism crashing into pastoral societies. Black Africans dispossessed of land became migrant workers in the mines. Mining magnates like Cecil Rhodes accumulated fortunes that dwarfed European aristocrats. The British Empire, seeing the wealth beneath Boer-controlled land, maneuvered to absorb the republic. The Anglo-Boer Wars from 1880 to 1902 introduced the 20th century's military horrors. The British, frustrated by Boer guerrilla tactics, created the world's first concentration camps, imprisoning Boer women and children. 26,000 died, along with 20,000 black Africans in separate camps, a forgotten tragedy revealing how racial hierarchy infected even suffering. And here's where everything changes. From war's ashes emerged the Union of South Africa in 1910. But union meant white union. The 1913 Native Land Act restricted Africans to 7% of the land. Step by step, a system of racial control emerged that would culminate in history's most comprehensive attempt at social engineering, apartheid. In 1948, the National Party won power with a single word, apartheid, meaning separateness. This wasn't mere segregation. It was an attempt to freeze history, to preserve white domination through pseudo-scientific racial classification. Every South African was labeled white, African, colored, or Indian, where you could live, whom you could marry, what job you could hold, which bench you could sit on, all determined by bureaucrats measuring skull shapes and examining fingernails. The system's architects believed they could create separate nations within South Africa, giving blacks citizenship in impoverished homelands while maintaining white control over the developed economy. Blacks needed passes to enter white areas. Police had unlimited power to enforce racial boundaries. Resistance was immediate. The African National Congress tried peaceful protest. On March 21, 1960, at Sharpeville Township, police opened fire on protesters demonstrating against pass laws. 69 died, shot mostly in the back as they fled. The massacre transformed resistance from peaceful to armed. Nelson Mandela, a lawyer who had advocated nonviolence, concluded that apartheid would only yield to force. Captured in 1962, he spent 27 years imprisoned on Robben Island, becoming a global symbol of resistance. The Soweto uprising of 1976 saw school children protesting Afrikaans language instruction met with bullets. Images of dead teenagers shocked the world. International pressure mounted through the 1980s. Sanctions crippled the economy. South African athletes were banned from competition. The border war in Angola drained resources and lives. White South Africa was becoming a pariah state. By 1989, even hardliners recognized apartheid's unsustainability. President F.W. de Klerk released Mandela and began dismantling apartheid. The negotiations that followed were miraculous, a peaceful transition from oppression to democracy. In 1994, millions queued to vote in South Africa's first democratic election, electing Mandela president. The rainbow nation Mandela envisioned proved more elusive than freedom itself. Economic inequality largely following racial lines persisted. Crime soared. HIV and AIDS ravaged communities. Corruption infected the liberation movement. Many whites emigrated. Many blacks remained trapped in poverty. Yet South Africa's transformation remains remarkable. It possesses Africa's most sophisticated economy, its freest press, its strongest institutions. Its constitution is among the world's most progressive. The very fact that such different peoples coexist in a functioning democracy defies historical precedent. Standing at Africa's southern tip today, one sees the convergence of all human history, from humanity's first artists to its newest democracies, from ancient wisdom to modern technology, from the worst of human prejudice to the best of human reconciliation. South Africa remains what it has always been, a testing ground for humanity's oldest question: can different peoples share the same beloved country? Perhaps the answer lies in South Africa's ultimate lesson, that the longest journey isn't from oppression to freedom, but from freedom to justice. If this story moved you, you need to see how Rwanda went from genocide to Africa's most miraculous recovery in just 30 years. Click that video now and subscribe so you never miss history with Rambo.